It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, Brian, here's the next question. This one is from Jake. Jake said, do the guys recommend supplemental disability insurance above and beyond employer provided? Married, 40-year-old, working in software. So, Brian, I think first, what is disability insurance? Why do we need it? Are there different types of it? Is what my employer gives me good enough, or should I think about also having some on the outside?
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you asked the question we did, because I think this is like most things. I'm trying not to make an analogy when it's unnecessary, but it's
Does this have to do with cars?
No, having a background in tax planning. Everybody thinks tax codes are so complicated, and I always just say you have to understand the why. If you just go read the instructions to a form before you actually look at a form, you'll have a much better understanding of what the intent was for this. So when you look at disability insurance, what is the why on this is once again comes back to just like term life insurance is in case you die prematurely, what's the things that will replace the income for unfulfilled obligations you have. And that might be debts, that might be income for your surviving spouse, that might be education goals. Well, death is not the only thing that triggers that need. And there's actually a lot of research that shows you're much more likely to become disabled than you already even
prematurely die,
and might not be able to do your job. So it's another thing that can be insured. And remember, we don't sell insurance, so this is our take on this. Is that I think you have to first ask yourself, how susceptible is my family and my desires and my goals financially if I'm no longer able to work? And for most of us, it's going to be you're going to be on fragile, shaky ground if you no longer can work just because you're disabled. So once you decide that the need is there, you need to figure out how much. And that's why, now, here's a few cool things. And because it's written into the tax policy. So maybe it's okay that I did my tax analogy. If you pay with after-tax premiums, meaning you pay with your after-tax, meaning you didn't get a tax deduction when you funded the premiums, the IRS does allow, because it was written into legislation, that the benefits for disability insurance is paid tax-free.
Yep.
So with that's a huge head start, because think about how many of us are paying over 30% of our income goes to pay taxes. If that now the net benefit comes to us tax-free, man, we can pay for a lot of life with that. So that first gives you a huge head start that you don't have to replace 100% of your income. Maybe you only need to replace 60% of your income. Depends on really go look at your tax situation, look at your living expenses. So once we figure out how much you need, and if it's 60% is a good rule of thumb, we can again go compare what does my employer pay for? Take into account, because if it's employer paid, remember, you're not going to get the tax benefit. Maybe you have to reduce that down for net of taxes. But do that comparison so you can figure out what is the need and how much are the premiums. What is by the way, you also need to make sure you have enough cash reserves to make it through the waiting period that you have to do on different premiums. All this stuff comes into play, but it's definitely a very important exercise when you're looking at the mitigating of risk in your overall financial life.
Another big benefit to having disability insurance outside of your employer is if you do change jobs, perhaps you had disability insurance with one employer and then you go to a new employer, they may not offer it, right? So one of the good things about having an outside policy is you do get to take it with you, you do get to carry it with you. I don't think you mentioned this. There's one other thing I want you to...
I left a little meat on there. I know where you're going.
Okay. You talked about, there's two different types, right? Why don't you go and talk about those two different types and why they matter?
Well, you have to pay attention to what you do for a living and how specialized it is, because there's Onoc, which means think about surgeons and stuff like that, is that if you work with your hands and all of a sudden, that part, you might find if you have just a general disability policy and your hands don't work like they should, but you could go work another job. We always use the example of be a greeter at Walmart. That policy might not pay the full benefit. So you need to pay attention to, so that's why there are, Onoc it allows you to specialize, meaning if you can no longer work in your occupation, that it will pay at this level, and it has different criteria for triggering it.
And usually a little bit more expensive.
It's going to be more expensive. And here's something I have done for my own person, because I have disability insurance too, is that it's okay if you have some Onoc that's more expensive, that covers some base level type of expenses so that you're not leaving the family penniless. And then maybe you could have some general disability insurance too, because that way, maybe if you can work part-time or go do something, because work is good, it is supplements with the Onoc policy. It works out. It doesn't have to be an either or. You can do a balanced approach, just like most things in life. It's not polar or binary. There's usually a lot of gray zone that you need to make sure you do the actual exercise, figuring out what the why is, what's the need, and what you qualify for, and work with all the benefits and kind of put together a plan.
I love it.